Cole Ramsey learned to carry the smell of diesel like a second skin. It clung to his jacket when he walked the planks before sunrise, when gulls bickered over bait buckets and the harbor breathed in long, foggy sighs. He stacked crab traps, coiled lines, and tightened cleats for whoever had cash for a quick fix. Some days it was $20 and a thank you. Some days it was a handshake that meant come back next week. He kept moving anyway, because stillness felt like sinking. His trawler, the Marlin, leaned in its slip like an old dog that had slept on too many porches. The paint was more memory than color. The wheelhouse window had a crack shaped like lightning, and the deck groaned when he crossed it. He did not look at the places he could not afford to repair. He looked at the cleats, the knots, the morning list of small jobs that kept bread in the galley and boots on his boy. From the bait shop door, a fisherman called out to others and then let his voice carry. "Captain Ghost is up early, chasing phantoms again." Another man laughed. If ghosts paid the dock fee, he'd be a rich man. Cole didn't answer. He tipped a coil off his shoulder and set it neat by a piling. Eli came trotting along the boardwalk, backpack bouncing. 10 years old, sharp as a gull's eye, he had learned to step on the quiet boards. He stopped when he heard the men. Eli waited at the edge of the laughter and tried to make it look like he was checking for minnows. "Dad," he said, keeping his voice even, "Mrs. Barker says I can help stack ice if I keep my fingers out of the bags." "Tell her you're good for 15 minutes, Cole said. "Then homework on the galley table. I'll bring you cocoa." One of the men leaned his elbows on the rail and eyed the Marlin. "She's one patch away from sinking. Might be kinder to tow her out and let the tide finish it." Cole tied off the line he was holding. "She still floats," he said, and kept his eyes on the knot. The right knot could carry a man through a storm. He had learned that young and was learning it again. Eli straightened. "She always floats," he said. His voice cracked in the middle, and Cole heard it like a scratch on a record. The fisherman smirked. "Hear that, Ghost? Your first mate says you're unsinkable." Cole touched Eli's shoulder and pressed him gently toward the ice house. "Go on," he said. "We keep promises first, feelings second." In the wheelhouse, the morning light cut a slice across the compass. Cole ran a finger over the rim and felt the tiny nicks left by years of hands, his father's among them. The harbor clattered and shouted, all the evidence a man ever needed that the world respected only what it could count. Cole counted breath, rope, and minutes until school began. He counted the thin bills in his pocket. He counted the ways a boat might fail and the one way it might carry a life anyway. Eli returned with pink hands and a foam cup steaming. He set it by the throttle and climbed onto the stool beside his father. "They think you're funny," Eli said. "They think I'm stubborn," Cole said. "Is that bad?" Eli asked. "It keeps a boat off the rocks," Cole said, "and it gets a boy to school on time." The fog lifted in a slow, dignified shrug, showing water the color of pewter. Cole watched it clear and felt the day settle on him like a net. Work first, words later. He turned the key and listened to the Marlin cough, shudder, and then catch. The engine's rough music climbed into the morning, and the laughter at the rail thinned to a few last chuckles. Cole looked at his son and nodded toward the bow. "Lines," he said. "Yes, Captain," Eli said, and this time the title was spoken soft and steady like a promise. The night wind off the bay carried salt and iron, two things Cole Ramsey trusted more than luck. The Marlin rocked gently against the worn pilings, her ropes creaking like tired lungs. Eli had gone to sleep below deck, buried under an old quilt that smelled faintly of kerosene and rain. Cole sat at the bow with a chipped mug of coffee, watching the harbor lights flicker in the ripples. The laughter from the other boats had long died out. Only the water spoke now, soft and low, the way it did when it wanted to remind him who it really belonged to. Somewhere in the dark water beneath, his family's story slept, half legend, half truth. He took a slow breath and whispered into the stillness, "I still believe, Dad." His grandfather's stories had begun the same way every time, told over the kitchen table in a house that smelled of tobacco and oilskin. The old man had been a deckhand when a freighter called the Goldfinch went down off Cape Fenwick during a storm in 1946. He swore that before it vanished, he'd seen crates marked with a government seal and a flash of gold spilling through the hull as it cracked. It wasn't no coins, the old man used to say. Bars, clean as mirrors. The ocean swallowed 'em whole, but she don't forget. Cole's father had believed it so fiercely that belief itself became the family heirloom. He'd spent years drawing maps on scraps of sailcloth, sketching the coastline from memory, adding arrows and question marks like prayers. Cole had grown up tracing those lines with his finger. His father died young, but before the end, he'd gripped Cole's wrist and said, "Promise me you'll keep looking. Not for gold, for truth. One day she'll give it back." Cole had made that promise. He'd been 18 then, too broke to fix the engine on his first boat, too proud to tell anyone that the sea scared him half to death. But he made the vow anyway. Same words his father had said, same look in his eyes that his grandfather must have had. And now, sitting there in the cold blue light, he realized he was the last link in a chain made of salt water and stubbornness. He took another sip of coffee, grimaced at the taste, and looked down into the black water. The reflection looking back at him was his father's in pieces, chin in one ripple, eyes in another, mouth disappearing under a passing wave. "I'm keeping it, old man," he murmured. "Still keeping it." A soft footstep behind him, Eli half awake, barefoot, hair tangled from sleep. "Dad," he whispered, "you talking to Grandpa again?" Cole smiled. "Guess I was." Did he answer? "He always does," Cole said. "Just not in words." Eli came to stand beside him, the boy's hand slipping into his like it had when he was smaller. Together they watched the dark horizon, waiting for the first color of dawn. The gulls hadn't started yet, and the tide was turning in. It was the quietest hour, the one that felt almost holy. Cole squeezed his son's hand gently and said, "Your granddad swore the ocean remembers its promises. Maybe one day it'll remember ours." Eli yawned. "And give it back?" "Maybe," Cole said, looking out where the water turned black to silver, "or maybe it already has." The sun came up thin and gray, the kind of light that made even the water look tired. The Marlin groaned against the current as Cole pulled another net from the sea, empty again. He hauled it up hand over hand, the rope slicing a faint burn into his palms, the smell of diesel mixed with salt and disappointment. Behind him, Eli sat on the gunwale, counting pelicans instead of fish. He'd stopped asking how many they'd caught. That question had worn itself out weeks ago. Cole untangled a clump of seaweed and flicked it overboard. "You know," he said, not looking back, "there's a trick the ocean likes to play. You drop your nets thinking you're pulling up fish, but she's testing if you'll keep trying when there's nothing but mud." Eli leaned his chin on his knees. "Then she's really good at testing." Cole almost smiled. "Yeah, she's relentless." They drifted toward the harbor markers, the nets heavy with nothing. On shore, the crane swung lazily, lifting crates of someone else's catch. Engines rumbled. Laughter carried from the dock, a sharp, mean kind of laughter that knew exactly who it was meant for. Cole didn't turn to look. He focused on coiling the rope neat like it mattered. "We'll make another run tomorrow." "Tomorrow's Sunday," Eli said quietly. "Then Monday." "But, Dad," Cole straightened and faced the boy. "I know." His voice softened. "We're not giving up. You hear me?" Eli's eyes darted away, tracing the waterline. "I hear you," he said, though his tone carried the weight of a child trying to believe what his father said. Cole went to the small galley and rummaged for the last of their crackers, handing one to Eli. "Eat. You'll think clearer on a full stomach." Eli broke the cracker in half and gave a piece back. "You too." Cole took it, chewing slowly, staring at the horizon. The water out there shimmered like hammered metal, endless and empty. He thought about the harbor fees due Monday, the late notice folded in his jacket pocket, the fuel tank nearly dry. He thought about the promise to keep believing, to keep rowing. Dad, yeah? Why do we keep coming back if it never works? Cole took a breath, the kind that scraped on the way out. Because faith isn't waiting for luck, he said. It's rowing against it. Eli frowned. But what if the tide's stronger than you? Then you row anyway, Cole said. Because one day, it'll turn, and you'll already be facing the right way. For a while, the only sound was the slap of waves against the hull. A gull swooped close, crying over their heads before vanishing toward the docks. Cole watched it go, thinking how everything that soared had to fight the wind first. He started the engine. It coughed once, then caught a rough, stubborn rhythm that felt almost alive. Lines up, he said. Eli gathered the nets, his small hands steady despite the weight. The boy worked in silence, a quiet mirror of his father. They headed in as the sky brightened to silver. Behind them, the sea kept its secrets. Ahead, the harbor waited with its debt and its mockery. But between those two, just there, where water met wake, was a stretch of faith wide enough for one more try. The leak started small, the kind you don't hear at first, just the faint sigh of water finding its way home. Cole noticed it after sundown, when the harbor lights shimmered off the ripples inside the hull. He crouched with a flashlight, tracing the damp line with his thumb. She's weeping again, he muttered. Eli leaned over the edge of the galley table, hair sticking up from sleep. You mean leaking? Same thing, Cole said. Boats cry when they get old. He found the repair kit and knelt by the seam, scraping away the softened wood. The salt water hissed as it met the epoxy. Eli brought the bucket and rags without being asked. He'd learned the rhythm of his father's repairs like kids learned lullabies. How bad is it this time? Eli asked. Bad enough to teach patience, Cole said. Not bad enough to sink us. The flashlight beam shook as Eli held it steady. That's what you always say. Because it's always true. Cole smiled. Hand me the resin. Eli passed it carefully. One day, he said, we'll run out of hull to patch. Cole looked at him over his shoulder. Then we'll start patching the patches. Eli laughed, a short, sleepy giggle that filled the narrow cabin. This boat's more patched than plank already. Cole chuckled, the sound rough but real. You might be right. He spread the resin along the seam, smoothing it with a steady hand. She's stubborn, though. Like someone I know, Grandpa? Maybe both of us. The Marlin creaked as a wave rocked her against the pier. Outside, wind rattled the rigging, 1,000 soft chimes whispering their age. Inside, the two of them worked in the cramped light, father sealing another battle scar, son holding the glow steady. When the patch was set, Cole sat back on his heels, shoulders aching. That'll hold, he said, though he said it the way a man says I hope. Eli put the flashlight down and sat beside him on the floorboards. You think she's tired? The Marlin? Cole asked. Yeah, she's been fixed so many times. Cole rested a hand on the wall beside him, feeling the vibration of the tide through the wood. She's not tired. She's tested. There's a difference, Eli nodded, eyes half closed. Tested, he repeated softly. They sat in silence, listening to the slow drip ease into quiet. The scent of resin hung heavy in the air, mingling with the old sea smell that never really left. Cole looked at his son, barefoot, grease on his cheek, flashlight rolling in his lap, and felt something loosen in his chest. You know, he said, someday you'll outgrow this boat. Eli yawned. Then what? Then you'll build one stronger. One that remembers every patch. Eli smiled through the drowsiness. We'll call it the Marlin, too. Cole laughed. You naming her already? Someone's gotta. The laughter faded into the rhythm of water tapping the hull. Cole reached over and dimmed the light. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow's another tide. Eli curled up on the bench, mumbling, We're still floating. Cole glanced around the cabin, at the seams, the stains, the living proof of persistence. "Yeah," he whispered. "We are." The harbor outside hummed low and steady. The patched boat rocked gently in its slip, her wounds sealed for another night, half plank, half faith, still afloat. The morning fog lay thick over the harbor, softening the edges of the boats and turning the masts into pale shadows. Cole was crouched by the Marlin's bow, tightening the mooring line when he heard a familiar shuffle behind him, the sound of boots that had spent half a lifetime on wet decks. "Thought I'd find you hiding out here," Walt Henderson called, his voice gravel-wrapped in smoke. The old dockhand's beard was white as foam, his cap stained with years of work. In his hands he carried something wrapped in an oily rag. Cole stood and wiped his palms on his jeans. "Mornin', Walt." "You looking to sell me another busted compass?" Walt chuckled. "Nah, this time it's free." Or as free as bad luck gets. He set the bundle on a piling and unwrapped it. Inside was a battered sonar unit, wires frayed, the casing cracked. "Found her in the back of the shed. Been sitting there since the storm of 2009, Cole whistled low. "She's seen better days." "So have I," Walt said, grinning through crooked teeth. "But she still hums if you treat her right." Bit like an old marriage, Cole lifted the device, testing the weight of it. The screen was fogged, the buttons salt-worn. "You sure you want to part with this?" "Son, I ain't going deep again. My knees protest if I bend far enough to tie my own boots." Walt leaned on his cane. "Figured you and that boy of yours might get more use out of it. She's half blind, like me, but she'll still see more than you can on faith alone." Cole couldn't help but laugh. "You comparing yourself to a sonar?" "Better than comparing myself to a fish," Walt said. "Besides, I hear you're still chasing ghosts under there. Maybe this'll help you find what's been looking for you." Cole ran his thumb along the crack in the screen. "Appreciate it, Walt. Really, don't thank me yet. She eats batteries like a drunk eats oysters. But when she works, she sings." Eli appeared on deck, rubbing his eyes. "Who's singing?" "Nobody yet," Cole said, "but maybe soon." He lifted the sonar with a grin. "Meet our new crewmate." Eli's face lit up. "Does it work?" Walt snorted. "Define work." Cole laughed again, shaking his head. "We'll make it work." As Walt limped back down the dock, Cole watched him go, feeling that strange tug again, the one that always came when the universe dropped something in his lap just as he was about to give up. The sonar was old, fragile, and unreliable, but it was something, a tool, a sign. Eli knelt beside him, inspecting the unit like a scientist. "You think it can find Grandpa's ship?" Cole looked out over the gray water. "I think it can find what it's meant to." They spent the rest of the morning wiring it in, coaxing life back into the circuits. When the screen flickered and hummed for the first time, Eli whooped loud enough to startle the gulls. Cole grinned, watching the faint pulse ripple across the display. The sound it made was low, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. He looked toward the horizon and whispered, "Guess she's not so blind after all." For the first time in weeks, the day felt brighter, the sea less cruel. Maybe Faith really did need a little help from machinery now and then. The morning sea was flat as hammered tin, the kind of quiet that felt like it was holding its breath. Cole leaned over the patched console of the Marlin, eyes locked on the sonar screen. The device Walt had given them hummed faintly, the sound mixing with the steady throb of the engine. Eli sat beside him, chin in his hands, watching the grainy green lines sweep across the monitor. "Anything yet?" Eli asked, breaking the stillness. "Not unless you count a crab waving at us," Cole said, tapping the screen. "She's picking up noise, though. That's something." The water stretched endless in every direction. Gray sky, gray sea, a thin line where the two tried to remember who they were. The air smelled of salt and old diesel, and the engine coughed every so often, like it wanted to quit but hadn't found the courage. Eli adjusted the dial the way Cole had shown him. The screen flickered. the hum deepening into a warbling tone. "What's that?" the boy asked. "Interference, maybe. Or a school of fish." Hard to tell. Cole watched the pattern shift, but then, for just a breath, something appeared. A shape too straight to be natural. A long, hard line that glowed at an angle on the display. He leaned closer, heart thudding. "Hold on," he whispered. The Marlin rocked gently as the sonar pulse swept again. There it was, faint, geometric, rectangular edges beneath the sand, not rock, not reef. Something made. "Dad?" Eli's voice trembled with excitement. "Is that—" "Could be anything," Cole interrupted, but his tone betrayed him. "A container, a hull plate, maybe more." They watched as the signal flickered, then sputtered into static. The green light dissolved into snow. Cole adjusted the gain, thumped the side of the unit, cursed under his breath. Nothing, just white fuzz and a steady hiss. "It's gone," Eli whispered. Cole exhaled slowly, his shoulders heavy. "Yeah, systems like this don't see far. She's old, but you saw it, right? You." He hesitated, eyes on the black water beyond the railing. "I saw something." The sea lapped gently at the hull, almost mockingly. Somewhere in the distance, a gull cried. Cole sat back in the chair, running a hand over his face. For a moment, hope had flared, bright, foolish, alive, and now it left the same ache as cold air after lightning. Eli touched the edge of the screen. Maybe the battery died. Maybe. Cole forced a smile. "We'll try again tomorrow." They sat there for a while, neither speaking. The boat drifted in the calm, the faint smell of engine oil mixing with salt. Cole's eyes traced the horizon, where the light was beginning to break, thin bars of gold pushing through the gray. Eli leaned against him, quiet. "You always said the ocean hides what it loves most." Cole looked down at him, surprised. "Did I?" "You said it once. When Mom's necklace fell overboard." He nodded. "Yeah, I remember." Eli's voice was small but certain. "Then maybe it's not hiding from us. Maybe it's waiting for us to be ready." Cole didn't answer. He just looked back at the sonar, still humming weakly, its cracked screen reflecting their faces side by side. Somewhere deep below, something had flickered, an echo of a promise. And even though the machine was silent again, the sound still lived in Cole's chest, pulsing steady as faith. The bell over the bait shop door clanged as Cole and Eli stepped inside, bringing a gust of salt air and the scent of diesel with them. The place was the same as ever, dim, cramped, lined with hooks and nets, a radio buzzing faintly behind the counter. A few fishermen leaned on barrels of chum, swapping stories between sips of black coffee. Cole placed his order for a box of squid, waiting while the clerk, a young man with too much confidence, fished it from the freezer. Eli stayed close, hands in his jacket pockets, still thinking about the sonar flicker from the day before. "Morning, Captain Ghost," someone called from the back. The voice belonged to Mason Tripp, a barrel-chested trawler owner with a permanent smirk. "Catch any phantom gold yet?" Cole forced a thin smile. "Not today." Mason grinned wider. "You're still chasing that fairy tale, huh? Thought your old man's stories went down with him." Cole felt the room's attention shift toward him. A half-dozen faces looked up, curiosity mixed with amusement. The clerk snickered. "What fairy tale's that?" "The Ramsey curse," Mason said, taking a slow sip of his coffee. 3 generations of dreamers chasing invisible treasure. Man, if belief could buy diesel, this guy'd own the harbor. A few of the others laughed. Even the harbor master, old Pete Dorsey, looked up from his newspaper and chuckled. "Cole, you still got that rust bucket floating out there?" "She's floating," Cole said evenly. "And yesterday she saw something." That earned him a louder laugh, sharp, echoing. Mason slapped the counter. "Oh, she saw something, did she?" "Maybe your reflection." Cole's jaw tensed, but he didn't rise to it. He knew how it looked, a widowed man clinging to his father's ghost, wasting time on a legend no one but the Ramseys believed. But for a second, he'd seen those lines on the screen, perfect edges under the dark. You couldn't laugh that away. Eli's voice came small but clear. It wasn't just noise. I saw it too. That drew another round of chuckles, softer this time but no kinder. Mason leaned down toward the boy. Careful, kid. Believing's contagious. Eli's fists balled at his sides, knuckles white. Cole placed a steady hand on his shoulder before he could speak. Let it go, son, he murmured. The clerk slid the bait box across the counter. That'll be 16 even. Cole paid, gathered the box, and turned to leave. As they stepped outside, the laughter followed, fading only when the door shut behind them. The wind outside was sharper now, carrying the sting of salt. Eli kicked at the planks, anger trembling in his voice. Why do you let them talk like that? Cole stared at the water, where the Marlin bobbed gently against the pier. Because if you stop to answer every fool, you'll never get back to the sea. But they think you're crazy. Cole smiled faintly. They've thought that my whole life. Doesn't change what's down there. Eli looked up at him, eyes wet with frustration. You really think we'll find it? Cole met his gaze, quiet but certain. I don't think, son. I know the gulls screamed overhead as they walked back toward the boat, laughter fading behind them, just noise now, same as the waves. By dusk, the wind had turned mean. The harbor groaned with it, ropes straining, hulls slapping the dock, shutters clattering like loose teeth. The smell of rain came first, sharp and metallic. Then the downpour followed, hammering the tin roofs in furious rhythm. Cole stood at the edge of the pier, hood pulled up, watching the storm roll in. Lightning ripped the sky open, turning the water white for a heartbeat before it fell back into darkness. The Marlin heaved against her lines, the patched hull creaking like an old bone. Dad! Eli's voice came from behind, barely cutting through the wind. Come inside. It's not safe. Cole didn't move. He squinted out past the breakwater where the sea churned wild and unrecognizable. Every crash of thunder felt personal, like the ocean itself was calling out an old debt. He murmured to himself, half prayer, half memory. She still remembers. Eli tugged at his sleeve. Who does? The sea, Cole said, voice low. She doesn't forget the hands that worked her. My grandfather, my father, all those Ramsey men who swore she'd give up what she took. Eli looked at the waves, uneasy. You mean the gold? I mean everything, Cole said. The gold, the years, the faith. She's held on to all of it. Another flash of lightning split the horizon. For an instant, the world was glass. The docks, the gulls, the rain suspended midair. Then came the thunder, rolling through Cole's chest. He turned finally, guiding Eli back toward the cabin at the pier's edge. Inside, the space was dim and cluttered, maps rolled tight in tubes, oil lamps flickering, a kettle hissing on the stove. Cole peeled off his soaked jacket and hung it by the door. Eli sat by the window, peering out through the fogged glass at the Marlin, still jerking against her ropes. She'll hold, Cole said, though he wasn't sure. Eli hugged his knees. What if she doesn't? Then we build her again, Cole answered simply. The boy looked over. You always say that like it's easy. Cole smiled faintly. It's never easy. But that's the point. Rain beat harder, drowning the sounds of the harbor, until only the storm's pulse remained. For a long while they sat in silence. Cole stared into the flicker of the lamp, lost in the ghosts that storms always seemed to stir. He could almost hear his father's voice, low and steady. Don't curse the sea, son. She's just doing what she's always done. Eli broke the quiet. Do you think Grandpa ever saw the ship? The one with the gold? Cole nodded slowly. I think he saw enough to believe. The boy tilted his head. And you? Cole met his eyes. I saw a shape on that screen yesterday. That's enough for me. A blast of thunder shook the window pane. Eli flinched, and Cole pulled him close. The storm howled around them, but inside there was warmth, a tiny, stubborn circle of light against everything roaring outside. Cole whispered, more to himself than to Eli. The sea remembers, but so do we. Outside, lightning struck again, and for a brief, brilliant second, the Marlin shone like new, like she'd been waiting for that light all along. The morning after the storm, the harbor was glass again, too calm, too bright, as if the night's fury had been a dream. The Marlin sat heavy in her berth, dripping and groaning but intact. Cole moved slowly across the deck, tightening ropes, checking for damage, his muscles still carrying the memory of thunder. Below deck, Eli rummaged through the narrow cabin, humming to himself. He was supposed to be drying things out, but curiosity had its own compass. He lifted the corner of an old blanket under the bunk and heard something scrape metal against wood. He froze, then reached deeper. His fingers brushed a small tin box, rusted around the edges, sealed tight with tape that had long since turned brittle. "Dad," he called, "there's something under here." Cole ducked down the hatch, wiping his hands on a rag. "What did you find?" Eli held it up like treasure. "This." It was hidden under the bunk. Cole took it carefully, running his thumb across the lid. The tape was stiff, the metal cold even in the sunlight streaming through the porthole. He recognized the handwriting faintly visible through the grime, his father's name, scrawled in that impatient, slanted way. He sat down on the bunk and peeled the tape away. The lid gave with a hiss. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were a few yellowed pages, a small compass, and a photograph of a ship, the Goldfinch, its name painted in curling letters on the stern. Eli leaned in close. "That's the one, isn't it? The ship you always talk about?" Cole nodded slowly. "That's her." He unfolded the papers with care. They weren't just notes. They were sketches, diagrams of a hull, depth markings, and coordinates penciled in circles. In the corner of one page, written in his father's steady hand, were the words, "The ocean keeps its word." Cole stared at the phrase, his throat tightening. He hadn't heard those words since he was a boy, sitting beside his father on a night just like the last. Wind shaking the windows, lantern light flickering across maps spread on the table. "The sea doesn't lie, son," his father had said. "It hides, but it doesn't lie." Eli pointed to the coordinates. "Does that mean he found it?" "Maybe," Cole whispered. "Or maybe he got close." Eli traced the lines with his finger. "Then we go there." Cole looked at him, startled. "It's not that simple." The Goldfinch went down in deep water, far from shore. Even with the coordinates, it could take weeks to. "But you said faith isn't waiting for luck," Eli interrupted. "It's rowing against it." Cole froze, caught by his own words. He looked back at the pages, the neat sketches, the compass still pointing true, and felt something stir that had been quiet for years. Hope, but steadier this time, older. He closed the tin, holding it like something sacred. "All right," he said finally, "we'll check the maps. See how far those numbers really are." Eli's face lit up. "So we're going?" Cole smiled, the corners of his mouth cracking like sun on dry paint. "We're going." Above them, the water lapped gently at the hull as if listening. The Marlin creaked, the wind shifted, and the faint scent of brine carried through the cabin. It felt, for the first time in a long time, like the sea was keeping its word. By noon the next day, the harbor smelled of diesel and worry. The rain had left puddles in the cracked boards, and Cole stood outside the Marlin counting folded bills that didn't add up to enough. His hands were cracked from rope work, his nails black with grease. Eli was below deck, sketching something from his grandfather's journal, humming softly, a sound too innocent for the kind of day this was turning into. A car door slammed on the pier. Cole didn't need to look up to know who it was. Mr. Haskins, the landlord, gray suit, slick hair, cologne too strong for salt air. His shoes clicked against the wood like punctuation marks. "Afternoon, Ramsey," Haskins said, pretending to smile. "Got a moment?" Cole nodded without looking up. "You've already had plenty." Haskins chuckled, that patient tone that made Cole's teeth grit. 3 months' rent on the slip? I've been lenient, real lenient, considering this boat's one good wave away from the scrapyard. Cole's jaw tightened. You'll get your money. Will I? Haskins stepped closer, lowering his voice. Because last time you said that, I had to threaten to cut power to the dock, and now I hear from the bait shop you're out chasing ghost ships again. I'm not running a charity. Cole met his gaze, eyes flat. Neither am I. Then prove it, Haskins said. You've got till Friday. After that, I tow her out myself. He tapped the hull with his shoe. Shouldn't be hard to find the bottom. The words hit harder than they should have. Cole waited until the man's footsteps faded before he let his shoulders sag. He stared down at the bundle of bills in his hand, damp from sweat and sea mist. Half a week's groceries, maybe enough for fuel if he cut corners. Eli climbed up from below deck, his face bright with discovery. Dad, look, I think I found where the coordinates meet the channel line. It's not too far, maybe. He stopped when he saw his father's face. What happened? What? Cole tucked the money back into his pocket. Just business. Was it the rent guy again? Cole gave a small nod. Eli's mouth thinned. We can sell the radio. Or the tackle crate. No, Cole interrupted gently. We don't sell the tools that get us there. Eli frowned. Then how do we pay him? Cole looked past him, out at the horizon. The sea was calm again, but something beneath it seemed alive, waiting. We don't, he said finally. Not yet. Eli hesitated. So what do we do? Cole turned, eyes sharper now, a decision hardening in them. We dive. Eli blinked. What? We'll dive, Cole repeated, steady as a tide. We'll find what they couldn't. Your grandfather, his father, they came close. It's our turn now, Eli's voice dropped. And if we don't? Cole looked him straight in the eye. Then we drown trying. The boy swallowed hard, but he didn't look away. Somewhere behind the fear was belief, thin but shining. As the sun sank red over the harbor, Cole went back to the deck, hands tightening ropes, checking gear, the old rhythm returning. Around him, gulls cried and engines coughed to life. The world didn't care whether he found gold or ruin. But the vow in his chest was heavier than either. The morning sea was flat as glass, the kind of stillness that made you forget how cruel it could be. Cole stood barefoot on the deck, wetsuit half-zipped, air tank clanking against the railing. The Marlin drifted at the edge of the channel, right where the coordinates from his father's journal said the goldfinch had gone under. 100 feet below them, maybe less, maybe more, lay the reason 3 generations of Ramseys had refused to quit. Eli held the rope, eyes wide. You sure the tank's good? Cole checked the gauge again. The needle wavered near the red. Good enough. That's what you said about the radio. Cole smiled faintly. That worked out fine too, didn't it? Eli didn't laugh. His fingers tightened around the rope. Just be careful, okay? I'll be back before you finish worrying, Cole said. He pulled the mask down and stepped onto the ladder. The water was cold and green and quiet. When he slid beneath the surface, sound vanished. Only the pulse in his ears remained. Light fell away fast, dimming from gold to gray to black-green. His breath filled the regulator in ragged bursts. Too loud, too human. He descended slowly, following the flicker of his dive light. At 30 feet, the world blurred. At 50, it opened. Silt rolled like smoke across the seabed. Then something caught the beam. A glint, dull and curved. He kicked closer. Metal. He steadied himself, heart hammering. The shape was wrong for a rock. Too smooth, too deliberate. The silt cleared just enough to show a fragment of railing, the kind you'd see on an old freighter deck. He ran his gloved fingers along it, the metal flaking under his touch. Then, faintly in the distance, another shape, something larger, half-buried, rising out of the seabed like the ribs of a whale. He blinked, breath quickening. The goldfinch. It had to be. His gauge needle trembled again. Low air. He wanted to stay, to scrape, to see just one more piece, but instinct won. He turned upward, kicking hard. The water seemed to resist him, dragging at his legs, thick with silt and memory. When he broke the surface, he ripped off the mask, gasping. Eli was leaning over the railing. "Dad." Cole clung to the ladder, chest heaving. "It's down there." Eli blinked. "You saw it?" Cole nodded, still catching his breath. "Metal. Big. She's real, Eli. She's real." Eli grinned so wide it broke the morning silence. "I knew it." Cole hauled himself back aboard, collapsing on the deck, water pooling around him. The world felt sharper, sky bluer, air colder. His arms shook, but not from exhaustion. It was something else. He looked at the sea, calm, patient, vast. For years he'd cursed it, pleaded with it, doubted it. But now, for the first time, he felt it looking back. He laughed softly. "Your great-grandfather wasn't crazy after all." Eli knelt beside him, still gripping the rope. "What happens next?" Cole leaned his head back, eyes half closed, grin thin but alive. "Now," he said, "we go get what's ours." The horizon shimmered, and beneath the still surface something ancient waited. Gold, rust, and promise twined together in the deep. By the next morning, the harbor was already whispering. News traveled faster than tides here, bending through mouths that salted truth into whatever shape kept people entertained. "Ramsey's diving again," someone said at the tackle shop. "Claims he found something." By noon, the story had grown teeth. He'd hauled up a chest, a bell, a whole ship. Cole felt it in every stare. Fishermen smirked as he passed, pretending to tighten knots or coil ropes while trading looks behind his back. At the diner, the waitress asked if he wanted his golden breakfast special. Eli didn't get the joke, but Cole did, and he paid cash without a word. By afternoon, a man in a pressed linen jacket appeared at the dock. He looked out of place against the rust and gulls, like he'd wandered out of a brochure for a life that smelled nothing like fish oil or sweat. "Mr. Ramsey?" he called, smooth as tidewater. Cole didn't turn at first. He was patching a cable, grease on his hands, the hum of the generator masking half the words. "You're looking at him," he said finally. "Gavin Pike," the man said, stepping forward with an easy smile. "I oversee shoreline development around these parts. Heard you might have found something of historical interest." Cole wiped his hands on a rag. "Who told you that?" "Oh, you know how small towns are," Pike said lightly. "Word floats." "Folks talk, they always do," Cole said. Pike leaned against a piling, careful not to dirty his jacket. "You've got ambition, I'll give you that. Diving out there with that old rig, chasing what your grandfather never found." Cole looked at him then, sharp and steady. "You knew my grandfather?" "Not personally," Pike said, "but I know a good story when I hear one. A family legacy, a lost ship, generations of belief. There's real value in that. And if there's value in the wreck itself, well," he smiled wider, "we could help you locate it properly. With funding, equipment, permits, you'd get a generous finder's fee, of course, Cole's rag stilled in his hand. And you'd get the rest." Pike chuckled softly. "Come now. Don't make it sound so grim. Think of it as collaboration. You've done the dreaming, we do the doing." Cole looked past him out at the gray horizon. The sea looked calm again, but he'd learned not to trust calm. "Appreciate the offer," he said slowly, "but we're not for sale." "Not yet," Pike said, straightening. "But this sort of thing has costs, Mr. Ramsey. And from what I hear, you've got bills nipping at your heels." Cole met his eyes, unblinking. "We'll manage." Pike's smile cooled. "Suit yourself. But remember, people around here forget who started what. By the time the story gets big enough, it won't have your name on it anymore." He walked off down the pier, shoes clicking sharp against the boards. Eli came up from below deck holding the journal. "Who was that?" "Another man who thinks he can buy the sea," Cole said. Eli frowned. "Can he?" Cole looked back toward the water where sunlight flickered in long, restless bands. "Not this time," he said. The gulls screamed overhead, circling something unseen. The harbor went quiet again, but the air felt different, charged, like the moment before a storm. The next morning brought no peace, only fog. It crept low over the harbor, muffling gulls and footsteps, turning the world into a gray hush. Cole was sorting gear on the Marlin when he heard the purr of a car engine rolling over the boards. Not many cars braved the dock. The sound didn't belong. When he looked up, Gavin Pike's polished sedan cut through the mist like a blade. The door opened, and out stepped Pike, immaculate as ever, shoes too clean for the pier, smile too bright for the weather. "Morning, Captain," he said smoothly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Cole didn't answer. He kept checking the air hose for leaks. Pike stepped closer, pulling a sleek envelope from his jacket. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said. "That dive of yours stirred quite the conversation. A man like you could use a little security, something to ease the weight." Cole finally looked up. "If you came here to talk, say what you mean." Pike unfolded the envelope and revealed a check. The ink caught what little light there was, and the number hit like a slap. $20,000. "This," Pike said, tapping it with a manicured finger, "is a goodwill gesture. A small advance, if you will. You sign over salvage rights, I take care of logistics, divers, cranes, permits. You walk away with this now, more when we bring her up. No more risk, no more waiting for luck." Eli, perched by the rail, froze. Cole's eyes stayed on the paper. The zeros looked almost unreal. He could hear the whisper of the bank calls, the memory of his landlord's threats. He imagined groceries stacked high, the boat repaired, Eli's shoes without duct tape. For a heartbeat, it almost made sense. Then he looked back at Pike. "You really think you can buy a man's word?" "Not your word," Pike said with a smile. "Your burden. You've been carrying ghosts, Mr. Ramsey. Let me turn them into something tangible." Cole stepped closer, the deck creaking under his boots. "My father dove these waters until the day he couldn't climb the ladder anymore. My grandfather before him. They didn't raise me to sell their dream for pocket change." Pike's grin faltered. "Pocket change? $20,000, Mr. Ramsey, is more than that vessel's worth." Cole's voice sharpened. "Maybe, but it's not worth more than their promise." A long silence hung between them. The fog pressed in tighter, swallowing even the sound of the sea. Pike slid the check back into its envelope, smoothing the edges like a man sealing something inevitable. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "Hope doesn't pay the bills." Cole nodded. "Neither does cowardice." Pike turned without another word and walked back toward his car, the click of his shoes fading into the mist. Eli broke the silence. "Dad, that was a lot of money." Cole exhaled slowly, staring out into the gray. "Yeah," he said, "and it's still not enough." "And?" The boy followed his gaze. Somewhere beneath that cold, endless water, the goldfinch waited, and now, more than ever, it felt like it was watching back. Evening settled slow and blue over the harbor, the kind of quiet that only came after rejection and salt air. The Marlin rocked gently against her ropes, her patched hull creaking like an old lung still trying to breathe. Cole sat on the stern with a mug of instant coffee gone cold, staring at the horizon where the fog had finally thinned into stars. Eli was beside him, knees tucked to his chest, fiddling with a chipped compass. He had been quiet for a long time. Too quiet. "Dad," he said finally, voice small but steady. "Yeah? What if Grandpa was wrong?" Cole didn't answer right away. He just watched the water, how it shifted between black and silver with each slow ripple. "What makes you ask that?" Eli shrugged, eyes still on the compass. "Everyone keeps saying it. The guys at the bait shop, Mr. Pike, even Mrs. Danner at the store. They all think the story's just Something people tell. Cole nodded. People laugh at what they don't understand. Makes it easier than admitting they quit believing in something. But what if they're right? Eli said. His voice cracked halfway through the way it did when he was trying not to sound scared. What if there's no ship? No gold? What if Grandpa just made it up? Cole leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He could hear his father's voice in his head. The same tone he'd used when Cole was the boy asking questions that didn't have easy answers. Then we'll still be right for believing, he said softly. Eli frowned. How's that work? Cole smiled, faint and worn. Because believing in something doesn't mean you're sure it'll happen. It means you're willing to keep going even when you're not. That's the part most people don't get. They think faith is about winning, but it's really about staying in the fight when everything says you shouldn't. Eli turned the compass over in his hands, so even if there's nothing down there, we're still not wrong. No, Cole said, because the gold was never the point. Your grandfather used to say the ocean keeps its word, but maybe the word it keeps isn't about treasure. Maybe it's about trying. Eli was quiet again. The stars glimmered faintly off the water. You think he'd be proud of us? Cole looked out over the dark stretch of sea that had swallowed generations of Ramseys and still somehow held them. I think, he said, he already is. Eli smiled a little, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't look older than his 10 years. He scooted closer, resting his head on Cole's shoulder. The air smelled like rust and tide and something faintly electric, the pulse of the deep. Cole wrapped an arm around him and let the silence grow comfortable. Somewhere beneath them, the ocean turned and whispered, eternal and unknowable. Maybe it did hold gold. Maybe it didn't. But sitting there under the quiet weight of the stars, Cole knew they'd already found something rarer, faith that didn't need proof. And that, he thought, was worth more than any shipwreck. The morning started wrong. Cole knew it before his boots even hit the dock. The air felt too still, too sharp. No gulls crying, no chatter from the other fishermen, just the soft slap of tide against pilings and the low groan of wood. He climbed aboard the Marlin, mug of black coffee in one hand, and froze. The smell hit first, raw fuel, thick and metallic. His stomach dropped. He followed the scent to the stern, and his pulse quickened. The fuel line lay in two neat halves, sliced clean as ribbon. No accident, no fray or age or corrosion. A blade. He knelt down, running a hand along the cut. The edge was surgical, too deliberate for chance. He could almost hear the hiss of laughter from whoever had crept down here under moonlight, thinking it was some kind of joke. Eli's voice came from behind him. Dad? Why's the boat smell funny? Cole straightened, forcing calm into his tone. Just a leak, buddy. Go grab the wrench set, will you? Eli nodded and hurried off. Cole stayed crouched, staring at the wound in the line. He'd known people like Pike long enough to understand their kind of violence. Clean, polite, always done by proxy. The man's shoes had never seen salt, but his reach could ruin anyone who stood in his way. By the time Eli came back, Cole already had the spare tubing laid out. Hand me the 1/4-inch clamp, he said. Eli obeyed, eyes flicking between the damaged line and his father's steady hands. Someone did this on purpose, didn't they? Cole didn't answer right away. He tightened the clamp until his knuckles whitened. Doesn't matter, he said finally. We fix what breaks. A few hours later, Pike strolled down the dock as if summoned by the smell of confrontation. Rough morning, Mr. Ramsey? He asked, sunglasses catching the reflection of the Marlin. Cole didn't look up from the engine. What do you want? Just checking in, Pike said. Heard there was some vandalism. Terrible thing, harbor's not what it used to be. Cole wiped his hands on a rag and faced him. You hear about everything fast, don't you? Pike smiled thinly. Let's call it a talent for staying informed. Then you already know I don't scare easy. Pike spread his hands. I'm just offering sympathy, Captain. These docks are dangerous. Old boats catch fire, engines fail, things sink. I'd hate to see that happen to you, and your boy Cole's jaw tightened. We'll take our chances. Suit yourself, Pike said, stepping back. But chances don't pay for repairs. He turned and walked off, the echo of his shoes like a metronome counting down something inevitable. When the last of his footsteps faded, Eli climbed up from below deck. Was that him? Yeah. Is he the one who— Doesn't matter, Cole interrupted quietly. The sea'll decide what's fair. He fired up the engine. It sputtered, then steadied, coughing out a plume of gray smoke into the still morning air. The smell of fuel lingered, sharp and unforgiving. But the boat lived, and so did they. The night was windless, the kind where the harbor went still enough for memories to echo. The Marlin drifted under a bruised sky, her patched hull sighing against the tide. Eli was asleep below deck, curled in his blanket, while Cole sat alone on the stern, staring at the moonlight threading across the black water. He'd meant to fix another net, but instead he found himself turning the wrench in his hands like prayer beads. It had been a long day. The fuel line, Pike's smug warning, the laughter that still clung to the air at the docks. Yet it wasn't anger that weighed on him now. It was the ghost of every man who'd stood on this same stretch of sea before him. Cole closed his eyes and saw his father's hands, scarred steady, reeking of brine and diesel. You don't fish just for food, his father used to say. You fish because it reminds you that patience and pain are twins. One feeds the other. He could still hear his grandfather, too, the old man's voice gravel and whiskey, sitting on a wooden crate years ago, whispering stories of the goldfinch like bedtime myths. She went down fast, the old man had said, eyes gone far away. Took her gold with her. But the sea don't keep what's meant to be found. It just holds it till the right hands come along. Cole had been 9 then, the same age Eli was now. He'd watched his grandfather trace the map of the coast on his knee, marking invisible points only he could see. That night the promise began, not in ink, not in words, but in the quiet inheritance of belief. 3 generations of Ramseys, 3 men staring into the same restless deep, daring it to keep its secrets forever. Cole opened his eyes and looked out at the horizon. The stars shimmered faintly above the water's edge, as if some part of them had sunk there long ago. You were wrong about one thing, Grandpa, he murmured. It's not the right hands the sea waits for. It's the right heart. He set the wrench down, clasped his hands together, and spoke softly into the wind. Lord, I don't ask for gold. I don't ask for luck. Just give me enough strength to keep the line steady, to show my boy that a man can stand for something even when the tide's against him, that believing in the impossible isn't foolish, it's family. The water lapped gently at the hull like an answer. A low hum carried through the metal under his palms, almost like breath. Maybe it was the current, maybe it was something older, something that remembered the Ramsey name. Cole leaned back and let the wind lift his hair, the salt stinging his eyes. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel small. He felt connected, threaded through a story that began before him and would outlast him. He whispered one last thing to the night. I'll find it, Dad. For both of you. Then he sat there until dawn painted the horizon gold, the same color he'd been chasing all his life. The shed behind the dock smelled like salt, rust, and too many failed repairs. Every inch of it was filled with old gear, oxygen tanks that hissed faintly, cracked fins, frayed ropes. Cole and Walt stood in the middle of it, surrounded by the ghosts of dives past. Walt squinted at the regulator on the workbench. This thing's older than both of us, he said, turning the valve with arthritic fingers. You sure you trust it? Cole shrugged, eyes tired but focused. Trust isn't what we've got left. Necessity's closer, the old man grunted. Necessity's killed more men than the sea. Cole didn't respond. He was too busy patching the dry suit with marine epoxy, one careful stroke at a time. Every tool they used was borrowed or salvaged. Every spare part came from a favor called in or a trade that left them a little poorer. Walt set the regulator down and lit a cigarette. "You still believe it's down there?" Cole's hand stilled for a second. He looked up, meeting the old man's gaze. "Belief's all I've ever had. If I stop now, it's like my father and his father never tried." Walt exhaled smoke that curled through the dim light. "Faith is a fine thing, boy, but the ocean don't pay rent." Cole glanced at the ledger tacked to the wall, numbers scrawled in pencil, each one crossed out harder than the last. The landlord's threats, the grocery tabs, the repair costs. "I know," he said quietly, "but Eli's still watching. I can't let him see me give up." Walt's expression softened. "That boy's got more heart than sense, like his old man." "Yeah," Cole muttered. "That's what scares me." They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the scrape of metal and the ticking of a clock whose batteries had died weeks ago. Walt adjusted the straps on the oxygen tank, then looked over at Cole's face, drawn, pale, lined with sleeplessness. "You ever think maybe you're too close to this?" the old man asked. "That maybe the sea ain't hiding your gold, it's trying to keep you alive?" Cole laughed, low and humorless. "If I stop looking, it'll be like killing my father twice." Walt didn't argue. He'd buried enough friends to know when faith wasn't something you could talk a man out of. By the time they finished patching the last hose, the light had gone out of the sky. The Marlin waited at the dock, her deck slick with dew. Cole ran his hand along her railing. "Tomorrow," he said. Walt flicked away his cigarette. "You sure she'll hold?" "She'll hold," Cole said, though he wasn't sure if he meant the boat or himself. As they locked up the shed, a gust of sea wind blew through the slats, scattering dust and salt into the air. Walt looked back once more. "You know," he said, "some men look at the ocean and see an ending. Others see a beginning. You still got time to choose which one you want to be." Cole didn't answer. He just looked out toward the black horizon where the waves whispered promises they never stopped making. The morning began like every other. Gray horizon, coffee gone bitter from reuse, and the rhythmic creak of the Marlin's hull as it swayed against the tide. Walt's patched gear clanked at the bow, while Eli perched near the railing, eyes bright with the kind of hope that made Cole's chest ache. The sonar pulsed again, steady this time. A clean shape flickered on the cracked screen, right where the coordinates in the old journal pointed. Cole leaned closer. "That's her," he whispered. Walt grunted, squinting through cigarette smoke. "Could be a fridge. Or a car. You don't know till you pull it." Cole tightened his grip on the winch handle. "Then let's pull." The cable whined as it reeled up from the deep. The line shuddered, heavy. Salt spray hit Cole's face, and he didn't wipe it away. Eli jumped to his feet. "Dad, it's really down there." For a moment, all three of them held their breath as the ocean's surface broke, and gold flashed in the sunlight. It wasn't coins, but it didn't matter yet. It glittered. It shone. It looked like victory. Cole and Walt worked the hoist together, hauling the mass onto the deck, both of them laughing with disbelief. The thing was coated in coral and rust, but streaks of golden color ran across it in veins. Eli ran forward, eyes wide. "We found it!" Grandpa was right. Cole could barely speak. His hands trembled as he scraped at the surface with a knife. The golden shimmer peeled away in flakes, revealing the truth underneath. Scrap metal, brass fittings, rusted pipes from a trawler long dead. Not treasure, just junk. The laughter hit them before they even turned. From the dock, a group of fishermen stood watching. Some with phones out, some just shaking their heads. "Captain Ghost strikes gold," one called. Another shouted, "You gonna buy us all dinner with that pipe, Ramsey?" Cole stared at the heap, every muscle gone rigid. Walt's hand landed on his shoulder, heavy and quiet. "Don't let him get to you, son." Eli's voice was small. "Dad, it looked real." Cole swallowed hard. His throat burned from the salt air and something sharper. "It did," he said softly. "The sea likes to play tricks. She wants to see how bad you want it." The crowd's laughter grew until it blended with the gulls. Pike stood at the edge of the pier, arms crossed, smirking like he'd already written the ending. Cole took a long look at the shining scrap in the sunlight. Then, without a word, he kicked it back into the water. The splash was loud and final. The harbor went quiet. Eli blinked. "Why'd you do that?" "Because it's not ours," Cole said, staring out at the ripples spreading across the surface. "When the real thing comes, we'll know. It won't need pretending." Walt nodded slowly. "And what if the sea don't ever give it up?" Cole wiped his hands on his jeans, eyes still on the horizon. "Then it'll die keeping my secret instead of my shame." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of diesel and salt. Behind them, the harbor laughter returned, but softer now, uncertain. And for the first time in a long while, Cole didn't flinch. The sea had gone quiet, as if mocking him, the kind of stillness that came after a storm, not peace, but exhaustion. Cole sat on the deck of the Marlin with his elbows on his knees, staring at the dark water that had once promised everything and delivered nothing. The harbor lights flickered in the distance, soft and yellow, but out here the world was blue and black and endless. He hadn't said a word since they'd come back in. Walt had gone home hours ago, muttering something about letting the tide cool his head. Eli had stayed behind. The boy sat cross-legged beside him now, silent, the way only a child who'd learned the rhythm of disappointment could be. Cole rubbed his face with both hands, the salt on his skin burning his eyes. "Maybe they were right," he muttered. "Maybe it's all just a story we told ourselves to feel bigger than we are." Eli didn't answer right away. He looked at the reflection of the boat lights trembling on the water. "Grandpa used to say stories are how the sea remembers us," he said softly. "So maybe it's not about being right." Cole gave a small, tired laugh. "You're starting to sound like him." "I don't mind that." Eli's voice was steady. He was brave. "Brave," Cole repeated, the word sour on his tongue. "He died chasing a ghost." "Maybe," Eli said, "but he died chasing something that mattered." The wind carried their words away before they could land. Cole's chest tightened. The ache wasn't just about the wreck or the money or the laughter on the dock. It was the weight of trying, year after year, to prove that his father hadn't been a fool, that he wasn't one either. He reached down and picked up a coil of rope, turning it in his hands. "I've given everything to this, every dollar, every breath. What if the sea's just laughing at me, too?" Eli leaned back against the railing, watching the horizon. "Maybe the sea's waiting till you're ready." Cole looked at him. "Ready for what?" "For what you're asking it for," Eli said. "You said once it gives things when it wants to." "Maybe it's waiting for you to want the right thing." Cole blinked, caught off guard. "You really think the sea cares what I want?" Eli shrugged. "You talk to it like it does." Cole exhaled, half a laugh, half a sob. He stared out at the black stretch of water and whispered, "Then maybe I should start listening too." They sat there for a long time, father and son, framed by moonlight and memory. The waves lapped against the hull, soft and patient, as if breathing with them. Somewhere out in that dark expanse, the goldfinch still slept beneath the currents. Cole finally spoke again, voice low. "You cold?" "A little." "Go below," Cole said, his tone gentler now. "Get some sleep. I'll be in soon." Eli hesitated, then nodded. "Good night, Dad." Cole watched him disappear through the hatch. Alone again, he looked up at the stars scattered across the sky, their faint shimmer mirrored in the water below. He whispered, not to the sea this time, but to whatever still listened, "If you're waiting for me to be ready, I'm getting there." The wind began to howl just after midnight. Cole woke to the first low groan of the dock, piling shifting under pressure, a sound he knew too well. He threw on his jacket and climbed up to the deck, where the sky had already turned the color of bruised steel. The Marlin rocked hard, ropes straining against their cleats. "Dad," Eli's voice came from the cabin hatch. "It's happening again." Cole grabbed the wheel to steady himself as the rain came sideways, pelting his face like gravel. The sea outside the harbor wall was a boiling mass of foam and black water. He could barely make out the other boats in the row, lights flickering, masts bending, men shouting orders that the wind tore away. "Get below," he yelled over the roar. "Now, Eli." But Eli hesitated at the hatch. "You can't stay out here." "Go," Cole barked. His voice carried the kind of authority born from fear. The boy obeyed. Thunder cracked so close it seemed to split the air in two. Cole fought the tarp loose from the bow and tied it tighter, his hands slipping on wet rope. He'd weathered dozens of storms before, but this one had the feel of something personal, like the sea had chosen to test him again. The Marlin lurched, one of her patched seams groaning under the force of the tide. Cole braced his shoulder against the wheelhouse door. The world disappeared in sheets of white. Through the chaos, a flash of light illuminated the harbor. He saw it then, 2 boats down, the Harpy and the Bluefin, both breaking their moorings. The Harpy struck the rock's broadside and shattered, its mast vanishing into the foam. Men screamed somewhere out in the dark, swallowed by wind and water. Cole tightened his jaw and gripped the railing, whispering to himself, "Not you, old girl. Not tonight." The Marlin bucked again, her hull creaking but holding. The ropes sang like violin strings under pressure. Cole's knuckles turned white around the tiller as he steered into the current, refusing to let the bow swing broadside. Lightning struck close, so close that it lit the deck in pure white for an instant. In that frozen second, Cole saw the storm's face in the waves, monstrous, shifting, alive. He saw his father's eyes in the lightning, his grandfather's shadow in the foam, and beneath the noise the old words came back to him, "The ocean keeps its word." Then, as suddenly as it began, the wind shifted. The pressure broke. The Marlin rocked once, twice, then settled, floating steady in the sudden quiet. Cole stood soaked to the bone, chest heaving. The rain softened to a whisper. Around him the harbor was wreckage, splintered masts, broken hulls, lights flickering out one by one. But the Marlin still stood, her patched sides gleaming under the returning moonlight. Eli burst from the hatch, eyes wide. "We made it!" Cole nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He looked around at the devastation and then at their small, surviving vessel. "She held," he whispered. Eli followed his gaze. "How come?" Cole looked out at the calm water now smoothing over the wreckage. "Because some things the sea still remembers," he said softly. "It took enough from us already." He rested a hand on the railing, feeling the heartbeat of the boat beneath his palm. "She's protecting us now." The boy looked up at him. "You mean Grandpa?" Cole smiled faintly through the exhaustion. "Maybe him. Maybe something older." The wind carried the scent of salt and lightning away, leaving only silence, and the creak of a survivor that had earned her place among ghosts. The morning after the storm smelled like metal and salt, the kind of air that stuck to the skin and reminded you that something had been taken and something else had been spared. Cole and Eli walked the shoreline in silence, boots sinking into wet sand. Bits of wreckage lay scattered all along the curve of the beach, splintered planks, twisted railings, ropes snarled around driftwood. The Marlin had held through the night, anchored tight, but half the harbor hadn't been so lucky. Eli kicked at a broken beam that had washed up near the rocks. "Is all this from the storm?" Cole nodded. "From the storm, and from what the sea decided to let go." He crouched beside a chunk of hull wedged in the sand. It was old, older than any of the boats moored at the harbor. The wood was dark with age, the grain swollen from years below water. He ran his hand over it, tracing a series of half-rotted markings burned into the side. They weren't letters he recognized, but they had the look of something deliberate. "Dad," Eli said quietly, "that doesn't look like the others." Cole studied it longer, then looked toward the waves. The tide was low now, and out beyond the breakers, faint shapes drifted under the surface, dark forms shifting with the pull of the current. He rose to his feet. "No, it doesn't." Walt met them halfway down the beach, his hat clutched in his hands. "Harbor took a beating," he said. "Half the fleet's ruined, but your girl, she's sitting pretty like nothing happened. Guess she's blessed." Cole glanced toward the Marlin, still moored where they'd left her, sunlight glinting off the patched hull. "Maybe she is." Walt followed his gaze, then looked down at the waterlogged beam near Cole's feet. "That don't look like any modern wood. Oak that thick. Hell, that's ship timber." Cole crouched again. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "That the storm stirred up more than seaweed," Walt said, grinning without humor. "I told you the deep likes to spit things back when it's in a mood." Eli crouched beside them. "You mean it could be Grandpa's ship?" Walt looked at him, then at Cole. "Could be part of her. Could be from another wreck." "Hard to say without diving," Cole's heart pounded, the sound mixing with the crash of waves. He remembered his grandfather's sketches, the angles of the hull, the curved ribs, the note that read, "The Goldfinch carried her secrets well." "This wood's been down there a long time," he murmured, "and it came up right after the storm that spared us." Eli's eyes lit with quiet wonder. "So the sea's giving hints." Cole looked out over the horizon, where sunlight danced across the water's skin. "Maybe it is," he said. "Maybe it's finally talking back." Walt chuckled softly. "If that's true, you better start listening close." The sea don't repeat herself. They stood together, three silhouettes against the pale morning, as the waves washed more fragments ashore. Planks, nails, a single brass hinge shaped like a bird's wing. Cole picked it up, brushed away the sand, and turned it in his hand. It shimmered faintly under the light. "The Goldfinch," he whispered. And for the first time in weeks, his voice didn't sound like hope. It sounded like certainty. By morning, the story had changed. The storm that wrecked half the harbor had spared the Marlin, and now even the men who once mocked Cole were drifting down the dock with quiet nods and borrowed tools. The smell of salt, sawdust, and diesel mixed in the air as waves licked at the pilings. Cole was sanding the starboard side when Frank from the bait shop appeared, hat in hand. "Heard you're patching her up again," he said, holding out a coil of rope. "Didn't think she'd still be floating after that blow." Cole accepted it with a brief nod. "Neither did I." "Guess she's got more fight than most of us," Frank muttered before heading off. Not long after, two brothers whose own boat had splintered on the rocks arrived carrying planks. "Nothing left of ours," one said. "Might as well help fix yours." Soon the dock was alive with hammering and shouts. Walt barked orders like a general, his old voice rising above the whine of drills. "Brace that beam!" The girls earned better bones than she had. Eli darted between them, ferrying tools and bolts, his laughter cutting through the racket like sunlight through fog. For once, the noise wasn't mockery, it was work. Someone tuned a radio, fiddle music mingled with gull cries. The harbor master came by pretending to inspect the rebuild, but stayed to steady a beam. "She'll pass," he said. "Barely. But she deserves to sail." Cole stepped back, wiping sweat and dust from his hands. The Marlin gleamed under the noon light, bruised but reborn. "Didn't expect this," he said quietly. Walt grinned. "Storms knock pride out of people. Makes room for decency." As evening neared, they brushed the hull with a coat of the faded blue Cole's father once used. He painted slow, steady strokes while Eli watched from a crate. "She looks new," Eli said. Cole smiled. "Not new. Just stronger where it mattered." They worked until the sun sank, gilding the water in molten light. The patched boards glowed gold, seams sealed tight, the name the Marlin clear again across her bow. Around them, voices softened into easy laughter. the sound of old pride giving way to something humbler, something shared. Walt tapped the railing. "She's ready," he said. "And so are you." Cole looked at his son, at the men packing up their tools, at the boat that had carried generations of faith through failure. "Funny thing," he said. "The ones who laughed helped her stand again." "Maybe that's how the sea teaches," Walt said. "Breaks what's hollow, leaves what can hold." The tide rose, rocking the trawler gently as if testing her strength. Cole placed a hand on the railing and whispered, "We're ready." The harbor was quiet except for the water against the hull. No laughter, no doubt. Only the sound of a ship and a man rebuilt together. Weeks passed without rumor or rescue, only the steady rhythm of tide and labor. The Marlin sat tethered near the mouth of the harbor, her new hull drying in salt wind, her crew of two, father and son, quietly finding their balance again. The laughter from other boats had faded into distant echoes. Even those who still doubted seemed unwilling to disturb whatever calm had settled around them. Cole used the silence as a kind of teacher. Mornings began before sunrise. Eli would rub his eyes and stumble onto deck as his father pointed toward the horizon. "See that?" Cole said once, tracing his finger over a pale line where gray turned to blue. "That's where the day begins. Always know where it starts, and you'll never lose your way. They studied tide tables until the paper softened from handling. Eli learned to read the pull of the moon, to tell a flood tide from an ebb by the smell of the air. Cole taught him knots, compass bearings, how to fix a course when clouds hid every star. Lessons were never long, always hands-on, chalk replaced by salt water, patience by repetition. Evenings were spent mending nets or sanding rails, their voices low, their laughter unhurried. Walt dropped by less often now, though he'd sometimes bring coffee and stand quietly watching the two of them work. "Looks like the sea's teaching you boys her lullabies," he said one night, before shuffling back down the dock. In those still weeks, the harbor changed colors daily: pewter, silver, pale green. The storms had stripped away noise and left behind a strange kind of peace. Cole no longer stared at the sonar or maps. He let time breathe again. The dream of gold still glimmered somewhere deep, but it was no longer a wound. It had become a waiting. One afternoon, Eli pointed toward a buoy rocking far off. "How do you know when to chase something?" he asked. Cole smiled. "When the sea whispers instead of shouts." They drifted together on the quiet water. The boy leaned on the railing, eyes wide, the wind ruffling his hair. Cole felt a flicker of something he hadn't in years. Contentment. Not triumph, not discovery, but the rare peace of standing exactly where you're meant to be. As the days warmed, barn swallows returned to the rafters. The repaired hull creaked with life again. Even their meager catches grew better, small blessings that filled their suppers and soothed their spirits. The silence no longer felt like a pause before failure. It felt like breath before motion. Sometimes, at dusk, Cole would rest his hand on the rail and whisper, "Thank you." He wasn't sure to whom. Maybe the sea. Maybe the ghosts of the men who had kept this faith alive through storms and ridicule. Eli once caught him smiling at the horizon. "What's funny?" "Nothing," Cole said. "Just listening." She's almost ready to speak again. And beneath the hush of waves and gulls, he could almost hear it. The deep, patient heartbeat of the ocean keeping time with his own. The journal had lived beside Eli's pillow for weeks, its pages softened by salt air and the boy's careful thumbs. On a quiet afternoon, he brought it to the galley table, spread it flat, and tilted it toward the light that slanted through the hatch. Cole was oiling the winch, counting his breaths the way the ocean had taught him. He heard the hush in Eli's voice before the words. "Dad," Eli said, "look closer." Cole wiped his hands and leaned over the book. The old man's sketches of a freighter's stern filled the page, lines cross-hatched and dark. But in the margin the pencil was ghost pale, as if drawn with the last whisper of graphite. Numbers drifted at angles, almost the color of the paper itself. Eli angled the journal again. The light caught. A row of degrees, another row, a depth crossed out and rewritten smaller. Then a single note in tiny letters, pressed hard enough to dent the page even where the lead had faded. Too far north. Trust the current. Cole felt a slow thud in his chest. The coordinates they'd chased all summer lived on the opposite page, bold and sure. These new ones were tucked in the margins, like a secret passed from one heartbeat to another. "Where did you see it?" Cole asked. Eli tapped the corner. The dent first. Then the numbers. He must have run low on pencil. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he thought he would redraw it later. He never did. Cole ran a fingertip over the dents and felt the shape of his father's hand there, then his grandfather's voice riding the wind between them all. He laid the journal on the chart table and matched the faded numbers to the grid. The lines pulled south, well beyond their usual sweep, to a ribbon of sea where cross-currents braided and the bottom fell away in a slow, clean slope. He whistled under his breath. "Miles," he said, "we have been circling the wrong bell all along." Eli's eyes shone. "We can go now, right?" Cole looked out through the hatch. The harbor slept in a silver wash. Walt was 2 slips over, mending rope, pretending not to watch. The mockers were quiet lately, as if the storms had stolen their voices. Everything in Cole leaned to the south, like a compass needle that had finally remembered which way is home. "We go at first light," he said. "Fuel topped off. Tanks checked twice. No bravado, no racing. We do it the way your grandfather would want." Eli nodded, solemn as a deckhand sworn in. They packed in silence. Cole ran a hand along the rail and felt the boat answering him. The Marlin seemed to square her shoulders, if a boat could do such a thing. That night they ate simply and spoke softly. Before turning in, Cole brought the journal on deck. He set it beneath the stars and read the margin again. Too far north. Trust the current. He looked at the water. It was not shouting. It was whispering. "Thank you," he said to the dark. "We hear you." At dawn, the engine turned over on the first try. The harbor mouth widened ahead and the bow pointed south. The pages of the journal lay open on the chart, the faint pencil guiding them into waters where the past and the future met like tides. The sea was glass that morning, the kind of calm that feels earned after years of storms. The sun climbed slow and amber, laying a golden path across the waves as the Marlin traced her course due south. Cole stood at the helm, the journal open beside the compass, his fingers brushing those faint penciled numbers like scripture. Eli sat near the bow, face tilted toward the wind, a boy watching belief take shape in real time. "This is it," Cole said softly. "The current's right. The depth matches. We're here." He cut the engine. The water went still, except for the whisper of waves tapping against the hull. Beneath them, something waited. They worked in practiced silence. Cole checked the tanks, lines, mask, and knife. Eli held the rope coil tight, jaw set but eyes bright. The sun climbed higher, gilding the edges of everything. His boy, the rails, the horizon. The golden hour, Cole thought. The name fit too well. "You remember what to do?" he asked. Eli nodded. 3 tugs if it's clear. 4 if I feel you pull." Cole smiled faintly. "Good. Keep the faith, son." He slipped over the side and sank. The water folded around him like memory. Cool, familiar, infinite. Sunlight speared down through shifting blue, turning every bubble into a coin of light. His pulse thudded in time with the regulator. The depth gauge ticked lower. Then, through the green haze, the shape appeared. A hull. Twisted, coral-grown, half-buried in the silt. He recognized it instantly. The goldfinch, or what time had left of her. Iron ribs like a whale's skeleton. But what stopped him cold wasn't the ship. It was the glint. Something shone under the coral. Not silver fish, not sand. Something solid, rectangular, impossibly bright. He swam closer, heart hammering. A corner of it peeked from beneath limestone crust. He brushed it gently. The silt rose and swirled, and light exploded back. Gold. Not just one piece, a line of sealed ingots stacked like bricks under centuries of coral and shell. The marking still visible. Royal mint stamp. Untouched. Waiting. Cole laughed into the regulator. The sound came out as a wild roar of bubbles. He pressed both hands against the nearest ingot, then against his chest. His father's voice filled the water. "Keep believing, son. One day the sea will speak back." He kicked upward, bursting through the surface with a shout that split the morning. "Eli!" he yelled, ripping off the mask, laughing and sobbing all at once. He was right. They were all right. Eli gripped the gunwale wide-eyed. "You found it?" Cole threw his arms wide to the shining sea. "It's there, boy. The goldfinch, the gold, it's all real." The Marlin rocked under him, sunlight blazing across the water like 1,000 mirrors. He could taste the salt of tears and triumph. The vow was kept, the circle unbroken, 3 generations carried by faith to this one radiant hour. Beneath them, the sea glittered like it was smiling back. The winch groaned under strain, its old gears grinding like thunder in the morning quiet. Cole stood over the line, hands shaking, not from exhaustion, but from awe. The Marlin rocked gently, the sea glass smooth, holding its breath with them. Every foot of rope that surfaced felt like a heartbeat, every knot a pulse of history tugging upward. Eli knelt beside him, knuckles white around the crank handle. His eyes darted between the bubbling surface and his father's face. Walt steadied the boom arm, jaw clenched tight, the same disbelief flickering across his weather-creased features. Then, with a heavy splash and a dull metallic thud, the cradle broke the surface. The thing inside caught the light, and for an instant all 3 froze. It wasn't a shape you could mistake for anything else. The edges were too clean, too deliberate. It was a bar, the color of morning fire. Cole reached down, water streaming from his sleeves, and pried away the seaweed that clung to it. The gold gleamed through the grime, brighter than the sunrise. He held it for a moment, silent. The weight settled into his palms. Not just the metal, but the generations behind it, the years of ridicule, the endless faith. Eli's voice was barely a whisper. "It's real." He reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the bar. His reflection shimmered in the surface of it, warped and golden. "Grandpa wasn't crazy," he said softly. "You weren't either." Cole laughed, one short, broken sound, and pulled his son close with an arm still wet from the sea. "No, son," he murmured. "We were just patient." Walt stepped forward then, slower than usual. He wiped at his eyes before he spoke, though his voice cracked anyway. "I'll be damned," he said. "Old Joe Ramsey's ghost finally won the argument." Cole grinned, teeth bright in the light. "Looks like the ocean finally kept its word." They set the bar gently on the deck. Even through the layer of salt and mud, it shone like a sunrise that had decided to stay. The stamped markings were faint but legible. Royal insignia, mint year long, vanished from any bank ledger. The Marlin's deck filled with a strange kind of silence, not the emptiness of before, but the fullness that comes when faith turns to fact. Seagulls wheeled above, calling as if the whole coast had heard. The sun climbed higher, pouring gold over gold, until the 3 of them glowed in its reflection. Cole rested both hands on the bar, head bowed. "This isn't just treasure," he said. "It's proof. They kept their promise, and now so have we." Eli looked at him, eyes wide with wonder. "What happens now?" Cole smiled faintly. "Now," he said, "we bring the rest home." Together the sea rippled softly against the hull, as if nodding. Walt chuckled through his tears. "Would have been nice if your granddad left a note saying how many of those are down there." Cole laughed, the sound rich and alive. "Guess we'll just have to find out." And as the sun turned the horizon to molten gold, the 3 of them stood around that single gleaming bar, the proof of a legend, the answer to a promise, and the start of everything still to come. The harbor looked different now, though not because of what stood in it, but because of how it breathed. The wind no longer carried laughter at one man's expense. It carried hammers, saws, and the sound of things being rebuilt. Cole Ramsey walked the same docks that once bowed under his worn boots and rusted hopes, now polished and solid underfoot. The sea had given, and he was giving back. He'd been careful, quiet. The gold hadn't turned him reckless. It had only made his gratitude louder than his pride. Walt had connected him with an old salvage broker 2 towns over, a man who knew how to keep things discreet. 1 bar at a time, under false manifests and trusted hands, the treasure had become something else. School repairs, dry storage for the fleet, new engines for the boats that had survived the storm. He never told anyone how much there was, only that it was enough. Eli helped with the ledgers in the evenings, scratching numbers by the soft glow of the cabin lantern. "You could have just kept it all," the boy said once, not accusing, just curious. Cole smiled over the rim of his mug. "That gold sat quiet for 80 years, he said. "Maybe it was waiting for someone who'd remember what it's for." "What's it for?" Eli asked. Cole looked out the porthole to where the harbor lights flickered over the water. "Keeping promises. The kind that outlast storms. By spring, the fishermen who once called him Captain Ghost were lining up at his rebuilt dock. He helped them haul in their nets, fixed their winches, handed out coffee like it was currency. They didn't talk about the gold. They didn't have to. The proof was everywhere. The repaired trawlers, the fresh paint on the boathouse, the generator that finally kept the lights on through the night. Walt still worked his corner of the pier, a fixture as steady as tide. "You're turning into a damn legend, Ramsey," he said one morning, shaking his head as Cole handed out new nets to 2 young deckhands. Cole laughed. "Legends don't sweep their own decks." Walt grinned. "That's why they're usually dead. You're just getting started." When Cole walked through town now, people nodded instead of whispering. A few stopped him outright. Old skeptics, newer dreamers, wanting to thank him for the repairs, the loans, the quiet help that never came with signatures or speeches. Some even started calling him Captain Faith. At first he brushed it off, but the name caught on like sunlight on calm water. He didn't argue anymore. Faith had been the family trade all along. Eli began taking the wheel more often, steady hands guiding the Marlin out of the harbor's mouth at dawn. Sometimes Cole just stood beside him, watching the boy who'd once doubted learn to steer by instinct, by trust. When they came back in, the docks shone with new wood and old souls. The town had changed, but not because of gold, because one man had refused to stop believing that something buried could rise again. The sea was calm again, glassy and still as a held breath. The Marlin drifted a few miles off the coast, engine quiet, gulls circling above as if even they sensed something sacred about the morning. Cole sat at the small wooden table in the cabin, an old sheet of stationery before him, the same kind his father used to write tide logs on. The words came slowly, each one heavier than the last. He began with a date, though it didn't matter much now. Then, in his careful handwriting, he wrote, 3 men kept the promise the sea waited till the last was ready. He stared at the line for a long time, then smiled faintly and continued. Grandfather saw the light first and believed. Father chased it till his heart gave out. I found it, not because I'm braver, but because they never stopped whispering that it was real. If faith is a chain, every link matters. And if the sea is a keeper of oaths, then I thank her for her patience." He paused, looking toward the deck, where Eli was coiling a line. The boys' laughter mixed with the sound of gulls. For the first time, Cole realized that this, the peace between storms, was what the treasure had been leading to all along. Not gold, but the quiet kind of wealth that filled the soul. He dipped his pen again. "We took what we needed. The rest stays below, where it belongs. Let the deep keep its share. Let it remember that the Ramseys kept their word. Tell the tides that our work is done. The ink bled slightly at the edges. The paper smelled faintly of salt. He folded it once, then slipped it into a glass bottle. Green, thick, worn from years of holding nothing. He sealed it with wax melted from an old candle stub. On deck, the sun had begun to lower toward the water, turning the whole horizon gold again, the same color that had once driven him near to madness. Eli looked up when Cole climbed out of the cabin, bottle in hand. "What's that?" the boy asked. "A letter," Cole said, smiling. "For the deep." Eli watched as his father knelt by the gunwale. Cole held the bottle a moment longer, whispering something neither the boy nor the sea could quite hear. Then he let it go. The bottle hit the surface softly, bobbing once before drifting away. Sunlight caught it just right, flashing like a tiny star on the water. Then it rolled with the tide, slipping beneath. Cole stood in silence, watching the ripples fade. "She's carried us far enough," he said quietly. Eli came beside him. "Do you think she'll read it?" Cole smiled, his gaze still on the fading glimmer. "She already has." The water closed gently over the spot, carrying the note and the last weight of generations down into the endless blue where faith could rest deeper than gold ever could. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to subscribe to support our channel. Thank you, and until next time.